taking its time.
All right. Well, so are there any?
Good to go.
We're good to go. Okay, very good. Kevin, and I work here at Waters to help you guys have successful yards, colorful hedges today. But I'm going to put a lot into that, not just the selection of plants, because there's so much that goes into it. So I want to. Some of this is going to be a little bit general. I'm going to talk about planting and nutrients first, and some of the things that you'll see when you're not being fed properly, or your plants might be telling you they need something. And then we'll go into some selections. Some of it will be a little bit of the science. And if you have any questions, just raise your hand. We have a tight enough group today that we'll try and get to them immediately or save them until we're done, and we can go over them then. The theme of the class, did anybody read the actual outline? It was it was like 7 plants. I wonder what's 7? And then I was under pressure. I got to have at least 7. And then Eric texts me, oh, Kevin, I started setting up for you. Well, I think we got 7. So they're all a little bit different. And so let's just start with color in the fall, because that's what we get to see. And you have, you see the maples turning and some of the red buds that are going gold, and just some of the colors that you might want to incorporate in your yard over time. If the maple isn't really red, or the red bud, I have this red bud, it is just gold. The leaves are like that big, and it's just gorgeous. When your color isn't as vibrant, it's one of like 3 things that we found with soil type up here. One is acid, one is iron, and one is just a mineral content. Maybe you didn't get enough feed during the year, which a favorite food of mine for solving some of those problems is acid and phosphate. And your phosphate is the center number on your chart, and it is, there was a kind of a little nursery rhyme-esque that we would teach kids, and it was 3 numbers were up, down, and all around. And that was what they stood for. Phosphate is often sold, and rightfully so, as the flowering food. So it causes things to flower. But in that saying, it is the root food. It is a root food. I like to describe it as a root food with side effects of flowers. And if you take your plants into consideration, your happy roots, happy plant, right? So that goes to soil and the things that it can absorb. It'll be able to absorb phosphate and all its nutrients better if your acid is balanced. The phosphate, I like to prescribe giving it to your plants in the fall. That if you give them to them a little bit early and we have nice warm weather like this, it might want to continue to bloom, which is not a bad thing, but it's using it as opposed to using it for the roots. So I will use a superphosphate, which is 18-0. And this is a granular, so it's a little bit slower release, as opposed to flower power, which is to get things to flower. And the numbers on this, 12 for nitrogen, 48 for phosphate. And it's liquid. I mean, it's a powder you mix with water, so the take-up is a whole lot faster. And I'll cheat a little bit and sometimes use this if I don't have this in the fall. But I just gave my roses a big old burst of this, and they're just crazy, just covered. Like, I had one of my neighbors thought I had Christmas ornaments in my yard. My red roses are so big and fragrant. He came up to find out what I was hanging up in the trees. But it's I say all that because if you can give phosphate to your trees in the fall, your shrubs, I just buy a bag. I don't know if we have a bigger bag, or we may not have any of this.
Just that.
Okay, so I give this to empty it. Then I go out in the fall so that my plants can be fed. The side effect, the flowering side effect, red buds, peach trees, roses, everything in the spring, cotoneaster, everything that's going to bloom will now have it stored up. The only time the roots can actually work for themselves and heal is when the plant is dormant. So it doesn't have to be deciduous or naked. It doesn't have to lose its leaves for the plant to be dormant. Everything goes dormant in the fall and in the winter, and the roots are still working. So I advocate giving everything phosphate in the fall. And as most of you have seen this, the term is called pushing. So in the industry, you'll have great big greenhouses full of plants, and they'll get them to a particular size, and then they will push or throttle up on the phosphate in the drip line to get them to bloom, because they sell better when they're in bloom. And the side effect is when you open up a plant and it's solid roots like that, that's the phosphate going strong on the roots. And the side effect is the flowers that you have. This is what you can get your maples, your redbuds, your pines to do underground. This is what you want them to be doing during the winter time. So you don't neglect to water them. The evaporation rate is slower. A foot of snow, I encourage you to find the chart. 2 feet of snow is not very much water. So you water less frequently, but you water deeper, and you make sure they've got phosphate so that their roots support what they're going to do in the spring. And if you have a plant that needs to or is scheduled to bloom in the spring, it will have the phosphate in it. You won't be chasing it. Oh, it's putting up buds. Let's get some phosphate in the ground. No, it's already there. So I advocate you using the plant food that we've developed, which is a quarterly. So you're going to be putting it to bed with a fall feeding, and then you're going to come back after it starts to get cold and put some phosphate. The other thing that affects the color of the plant during the year is the acid. Oftentimes we'll get maples or some of the broader leafed trees brought in for diagnosis because they can't tell what's going on, whether it's acid or iron or what kind of mineral it needs. And personally, when I'm out of balance a little bit, I'm just not digesting my food right. I feel a little puny. I don't have the vigor that I usually do. I'll do baking soda, right? I'll put in a tablespoon of baking soda in water before I go to bed. That balances out my pH, so I can absorb everything better. Humic acid is the same, right? Well, your soil, you've been digging around in it, it is decomposed granite. And different levels of decomposed granite, some with some clay, some without clay, but the clay oftentimes is just super decomposed granite to a point where it's creating a slurry almost. And if you can break it up with acid, it will change the structure of the soil to the point where it releases the nutrients that are in the soil, high minerals in our soil. And you need acid to break apart that structure so that the plant can pick it up. And then the plant needs to be balanced so that it can pick up the nutrients. And so that when you're planting things that aren't from here but do well here, I buy a bag of acid. And I prefer the granular because it's actually got some nutrients in the granular, in the solid, rather than using the humic acid in a liquid form, which is available as well. We don't sell it, but it's great for relieving stress and bringing plants back. But about every other year, I buy a bag and just empty it. I put it on everything. Unless it's high production, then you get it in your mulch and stuff like that that you have in your flower beds or your fruit and veggie beds. But the acid's a great product. I had 19 acres in the middle of Phoenix, and when we would have a week of 120 degrees, I'd load up liquid humic acid in the drip system, and everything, tomatoes, squash, veggies, everything was just come roaring back because the quality of the stress release that's in there. The other thing, of course, is if they're a little bit yellow, if you don't have the acid right on your maples, you'll tell they'll be pink or rusty as opposed to red. Now, some of them are a little bit more rusty. It's in the Acer family, and I'll go into that in a second. But the iron and acid combined make a really great, it's really hard to hurt. So I'm using this. And it's got a bunch of other minerals in it. It's developed for long. We actually had a lady who she we didn't want to put a bunch of chemicals on her lawn. She lives out Williamson Valley. She's got a big one. And she came back tongue in cheek, mad because she had to pay her guys twice to bag it. She had so much after she put this product on. And all it is just water it, but it works in your plant as well. You're getting a good dose of iron, and you're getting your acid balance. So this is a great product on the stuff that you want to see color in the fall and a darker green in the regular year. But when you're treating your plants with this topically, like on the ground as opposed to spraying them, check your how they were planted and pull back your grass cloth a little bit, because oftentimes, especially if you bought the house and it was already planted, sometimes it takes a while. You have your grass cloth and then you have your gravel on top of it, and you're throwing unintentionally, you're throwing the granular stuff on top of those two mediums. And it takes a lot longer for it to separate and get down to the roots. So don't worry about the drip line, because most of the plants haven't been here long enough to be all the way out to the drip line. But I will pull the grass cloth back, and if on the acid and the iron, I actually take a rebar, or I'm taking the poles off because they've been on 2 years. Don't support something more than like 2.5 years. But if you rock the pole around and you pull it out, you have this really nice deep hole. So I'll pour half a cup in each one of the holes and cover it with dirt. And now I've got the amendment down into the roots. But you want to be able to get away from the trunk a little bit. Yes.
So if we do use the humic on our lawn, which is really greened it up, do we need iron also?
The question is, she's using the humic on the lawn, and she wants to know if she needs the iron. If one is working by itself, there's so many things that can be done in this industry where people will go, oh, well, I get this perfect result. Well, don't change it. So if you're getting tomatoes, don't put too much fertilizer on them, because I suggested using it. If you're getting what you want, then stay there. Humic is a great product.
Does iron work for roses as well?
It does. Does iron work for roses? Yes. Especially if you don't buy it. And I'm not advocating you not buy something, but if you get iron by itself, this particular product has iron plus. It's got acid and some other minerals and stuff like that in it. So if you're not sure about how to green it up, that's a great product. And I advocate deep watering and phosphate for your roses in the fall. I have an iceberg that I put in the ground, iceberg rose, white, super fragrant, covered in flowers right now. And then my Mr. Lincoln, which is the red. And I had both in big pots while I was having this hardscape done. And I bought the white for my wife, and she's not an advocate of the deep watering like I do. She wants to just water it, and the plant looks great, and feed it a soluble, and she gets okay results, and so she's satisfied with that. And I water 3 times. I'll go by and I'll give it a little bit of water, and I'll come back and give it a little bit of water, and I'll come back and give it a lot of water. And that way, I'm getting the roots all the way. I'm getting water all the way down to the bottom of the roots. I'm watering all the soil around it so that it can reach out. It's not just staying in its pot. When I took those two, I didn't interfere with how she was handling it, as long as the plant looked good. Right. And she took horticulture in high school, so it's very difficult to tell her anything. I mean, I love her to pieces. 41 years, so it's all good. But I went to dig the holes, and the roots on the iceberg were really shallow and didn't have the depth. And I pulled out the same size pot. I mean, we're talking big pots. Same size pot. I had to redig the hole for the red because the roots were all the way down. The thing was solid roots. It wasn't quite as aggressive as the plant I just showed you, but it was so much more healthy. It's two very different plants, but deep water and feed consistently. But yeah, if you're getting what you like, but acid and iron, We also have a fertilizer that's pretty balanced. That's the rose food with the systemic in it. So here where we only have a short period of high humidity, it's actually got fungicides and bug, it makes the plant kind of toxic to the insects. So I'll use that, but I buy a smaller bag because I have 4 roses and I don't have a bank of roses. So I try not to store stuff. I buy stuff to use it and keep going. Yes.
I have one, I think it's kind of what we bought into this house. So it's one big rose plant. I think I've had 4 blooms this season. It's pathetic. And they would bloom. It was almost like they bud and then go into 6 bud and just kind of done. They didn't really have any life for very long. And I was using the flower power, but that's kind of all. I just tried it to see if it would help.
Is it in gravel?
It's in the ground. No, it's in soil.
Okay, so she's got a big old
I think
rose bush that is buds, but the flowers don't mature, or if they do, they just open and fall off. So if it's a single, there are some of the antique roses. How old's the house?
93.
Oh, okay, so that wouldn't be the case. Just bring a bud or 2 in when it starts to come back out and let us take a look at it. We've got a microscope and we can cut the bud open and see. Oftentimes there's a parasite that gets inside of the bud. And if it's putting on buds,
Not many.
okay, well, it's sunshine,
It gets tons of stuff.
okay, and that's almost all phosphate, that the flower power. So I would just make sure that it's getting some balanced, and then I just want to take a look at it, take some pictures of it. You got to cut it back really severely in the spring. Go in and make sure you take out the dead wood. This is rose care, so your parasites will stay inside the dead wood, and it's got to be aggressively cut back. And I advocate the dormant oil and dormant oil. Sorry, my Texan comes out every once in a while. The dormant oil or fruit oil, it can be several things. It could be neem oil. It can be mineral oil. It's seen canola oil. But the real point of it is it's very effective in mold, fungus, and killing bugs because it suffocates things. It coats them with the oil, and a lot of the bugs are breathing through pores and their joints and stuff, and then you just basically suffocate them. And then, of course, fungus, you're just putting a coat of oil on it. And I don't use them when it's warm, but because you can burn your plant with the sunshine and the oil. It's like a little magnifying glass. So you stop using the neem oils and the dormant oils during the summertime. But in the fall, you can get, and they're non-toxic, most of them. So it's really a great product to use in the fall when it starts to lose its leaves, and then in the spring as the buds start to come out. Now you're without using any poisons, you've got a head start on killing especially scale that's on the bark and stuff like that. But you want to take the dead wood out, which can be precarious on a big rose with the thorns and stuff. But you want to get a really solid cutting after it goes completely dormant. And I advocate spraying because if you cut something back and you have a warm week and it starts to sprout out and it freezes, you can hurt the whole plant, not just that new sprout. So the roses they're easy and they're not. So it depends on the species, but you probably have a soil and a root problem. If you're getting the sunshine and there's other minerals that you need which are going to be in the fertilizer as opposed to just phosphate. But deep water is real key, and keeping the pest off of it because they suck the energy out of it, literally. So yeah, and so we're going to go back into now that we got kind of planting done. Well, there is one other thing on planting because hedges are not necessarily a size. They are usually a screen. And so you can have 15, 20 foot hedge, But in design world, you want to step down, of course, because you want to plant stuff you want to see in front of the taller stuff. And and think about backdrops, because if you have an evergreen backdrop, then you have your color in front of it. It takes a little bit of pressure off of the plant in front. It doesn't have to be. It can be deciduous if you have a nice evergreen background, or if you have some boulders and some evergreen. There's a euonymus that I don't have in stock right now. It's called burning bush, and you'll be able to tell. It's really fun. On most of the euonymus, they have kind of a cork-esque ridge on the new growth. So it's not really a square truncation, but it has these ridges on it, and that's how you can tell some of the species. But this one will go, and we will get them, but it's a nice dark green leaf until now, and it's just a mound of red. And if you can see through it, it's burning bush. If you can see through it, or and some of them will get 5 and 6 foot tall, but imagine that in front of your Vanderwolf. So if I brought this out specifically for this, will get enormous. And this particular pine has the softest needles, and the cone on it is really big when it's mature. So just a spectacular plant, but it makes a terrific backdrop for something like pyracantha that's got berries. That pyracantha is evergreen. So if you can place it with things that are going to lose or deciduous, it's the terminology. I never really found it helpful on the retail side or communicating with people to know the Latin terms, and I'm not really that good at it. I can't spell very well, so it's confusing for me. But I didn't realize, and I was talking to somebody the other day, I was telling her, well, put these conifers over here. She's like, well, I don't even know what a conifer is. What is that? So I will use the term naked for a deciduous plant. It's one that loses all of its leaves, so it's just dark naked, right? And then a conifer is anything that has cones. So there's a wide variety. Typically, they're evergreen. There's a few that will lose their leaves, but very few lose their needles. And the thing to remember is conifers, as they're considered evergreen, but it really translates into always dropping instead of just dropping once, right? So they have this really neat science about them that protects them. They put down their needles, and it has sort of a turpentine in it that will keep things from growing underneath it. So when you go and you buy a place that's got this 200-year-old juniper, alligator juniper, that's going to look really cool trimmed up, don't be raking all that stuff and putting it in your mulch bin. I mean, you got to let it decompose for a couple of years before it will keep things from growing. So I wanted to touch on that because oftentimes you'll get in the bigger conifers, you'll get ball and bag where they'll be burlapped, right? And that is something that's grown in a row, and they'll dig them up and they put them in a bag. They're supposed to wait several months before they send them to us, and the ones we buy are. So that keeps them from being shocked because they're cutting the roots. And you don't take away the burlap, but you do want to take away the string that's holding the burlap to the base of the tree. I just saw this on a friend of mine's pine in his yard. Could not figure out what was wrong with it. We kept feeding it different things, and the reality was it was buried too deep, which is something else to watch for. You don't want to plant any of this stuff any deeper than it's already growing. The roots can handle air and light better than the stalk can handle the pathogens or the bugs in the soil. And I was one of my neighbors. I took up 3 dwarf Alberta spruces that are just like dead, and they were all buried. They were planted way too deep, and they're like 85, so they're not really in a very good place. But that's what killed the plant. The water was working, the food was working, and my friend's plant was girdled, but you couldn't see it because of the way it was planted. So when we went to remove it, there was a nylon rope that was holding the burlap that is no longer there, and the trunk was fat, and the root stem was fat, and that area on the nylon stayed that size. And we're talking about a 7-foot tree. He's got several years invested, several $100s invested in this tree. And because it was planted in properly. So that's feeding them right, getting the soil balanced, and it's going to give you the color you want. And then a little bit about design and plant selection. But everything that we have up here and in the yard is for here. It's not grown for here, but it does well in a zone 7 with the soil that we have, provided you give the proper amendments, okay? We've gone through that exercise for you. We're not just bringing stuff in that looks pretty. These are crazy durable. And if you want to feel it later, this has got a sandpaper-esque sort of leaf to it. They're next to my drive, and or my neighbor's driveway rather. And I was just amazed. They come up and we have all the deer and javelina and stuff like that you can imagine. But they come back every year from that crazy root ball. So you take height into consideration and then color. And as you step down, you can have some of this color that's going to die to the ground. This is a cotoneaster. They are evergreen, great plant. This is one of the lowest ones. There's probably 7. We probably get 7 or so cotoneaster. Little red berry. The birds will eat. You won't be cleaning up after this. Every once in a while, you're going to want to just, if you want a shape to them, just get out the trimmers, whack it really crazy. I've got these in the front yard. The deer smell them, but they don't do anything to them. So this lower one will go 5, 6, 7 foot wide and maybe shin high. It'll get bigger if you let it, but I like mine low. But in the cotoneaster family, you've got all kinds of shapes and sizes. This is a cotoneaster as well. And this is vertical. I like this plant. It's called a cotoneaster parnii. And it goes, you'll see these out now that you'll see all of this. You know, it's like once you see it, somebody talks about a blue truck, then you see blue trucks. This goes burgundy in the fall. It's considered an evergreen. So it molts, it's putting on its new as it's dropping its old, so it never really just goes to sticks. And it's also called a cluster berry or cluster flower. And it's because it acts just like a pyracantha, where it has a bundle of white flowers and then a bundle of berries. But it makes for a great backdrop. You can let them get as big as you want, but they're thick and really pretty in front of something else or behind something else. The roses make a great plant in front of this. So you're blocking out what you want to block out, whether it's a neighbor or whatever. That's not uncommon to be 8 foot tall. And the roses, I think they're $60 or $70, and we've got a pile of them over here in Island at $25. But it's a great time to plant anything that's, well, right now it's just anything. It's my favorite time of the year to plant. Less hassle, get the hole right. Don't dig the hole twice as deep. Dig it wide and mix the soil 1/3 mulch, not half and half. You can set yourself up for all kinds of maintenance problems if you put too much mulch in the hole. I call it loving them to death, because you end up with dry rot and they don't hold the moisture. And it's just the mineral content that's in our decomposed granite is really great for growing stuff. It just needs some organic material, and that the plants are in 100% mulch. That's how they're grown. And then you put that in the hole, and if you mix your mulch, your bagged mulch with the soil you've excavated too much, then you just set yourself up for problems. You want that sandy stuff in there, and the acid that's created in the mulch decomposing is actually humic acid, and so it'll break apart the clays. But yeah, you want the sand, and roses are great. Don't plant any of this stuff any deeper than it already is. I try and plant so that I have color year round in the yard. Right now, my maples are looking so much better. I bought the house 2 years ago, and they put some maples in. They didn't plant the autumn blaze, but they're beautiful. They looked kind of yellow during the summertime, and they looked kind of blah, like, oh yeah, it's fall. Look at that. He's turning brown and his leaves are falling off. Just was not wasn't the maple that I wanted, but they were big enough to where I didn't want to place it. Behind them now are Oregon greens and deodar cedars. So when they drop, I still have this beautiful collage of different kinds of conifers. So my neighbors still can't look in, but the red that's on these trees now, because I've been treating them with acid and iron, it's a showstopper. And so you're looking at this with the dark green as a background. And so it's, as I trim those maples up to where I can walk under them, I'm still going to get to see, I'll look through my wrought iron and see iron, I'm seeing dark green. So it's not like when the tree is gone, the screen is gone. The tree is just another color in the depth of the yard. And yeah, so think about what you want the backdrop to be and mix it. I'm not monochromatic in the way that I plant. I'm going to do evergreens because I have the size and the space, so I will mix my evergreens. I've got, in my yard, I've got deodar cedar, Oregon green, blue cypress, Arizona cypress. I've got the green. I've got the blue, and there's a third conifer in there. At any rate, I get this crazy mixture. Oh, I've got a hoops, blue atlas, or a blue. Yeah. But the color, in the evergreen, when there's nothing, when everything else is naked, I've got all these really cool colors and shapes in evergreen. So it makes a great backdrop as you get closer to the house to plant the lower stuff. This is as an example, these silverberry are indestructible, and they are really colorful. The name comes from the metallic underside of the skin of the leaf. The flower is kind of nondescript, but they're so durable that you can feed them for a year or so and then just turn them off and they'll be fine. If you need something that's farther away from the house, and they'll survive. But you get to pick on some of this stuff whether you want it to thrive or survive. Indigenous to the area, if you buy stuff that grows here naturally, if you buy it in a container, that plant has never grown naturally. So it doesn't, just because it's from here, you bought it in a nursery, it's been cared for since it started growing, and you put it in the ground and people turn them off, and it's like, turn off the water. Well, it's from here. Yeah, well, that's why it died, because you turn the water off. So there's watering schedules that we can talk about, and there's it's online, and there's one that's at the register as well. How much to water a plant, the size of the bucket, that sort of thing. I bring these up because they're evergreen, and they'll get as big as you let them. So if you have a bunch of green out there, but you have a hole, and you don't want to plant a conifer, or a pine, or something that puts on cones, then you can plant that. It's one of the few that I will plant gold or yellow. That's called gilded edge silverberry, and that's his cousin, just the regular silverberry. And I say that because the soil pH and the mineral contents in our soil, yellow tends to not look as strong to me as the white. And if your pH or your soil is out of balance a little bit, your watering's out of balance a little bit, the yellow looks a little sick. And it's just a personal preference. But because you're a captive audience, you have to suffer through my opinion. So these are euonymus. This is yellow, variegated yellow. It's silver or white. And another example of evergreen. So if you want color without having to go with a conifer, or if you want evergreen without going for a conifer, or if you want color without waiting for it to flower, these are really great products. They'll get 7-8 foot tall if you let them, or you can just keep them cut really compact. And this is just going to take a little bit more care to keep the yellow as opposed to the white. And so that's, again, just personal preference. If you have another indicator of your soil. Some of you may have this because it's grossly popular, is the red tip Petonia. And it's got a cluster berry and a cluster of white flowers that's followed by the berries. Plant these too thick, they get a little bit of, they're susceptible to fungus during that brief humid season we have. But an indicator of lack of iron or lack of acid, it depends on the soil you have, lack of good mineral exposure. This will be kind of blah as opposed to red. The new growth will come out and it will have a different color than the dark green. And these are evergreen, but it won't be as dramatic. So you want the new growth on this to be this kind of red. But you can see, oh, it looks a little puny. It's just food. Could be watering, but more than likely it's food. Another great, the hollies grow really well here. This is just a variegated holly. So from design-wise, when I'm working in somebody's yard, if I'm helping them plant things, I'm not putting spiny stuff near the front door or walking up to the front door. It's kind of my own remnant of feng shui. No cactus, no spiny leaves. It just says don't come in. But I lay my boards and my tile going in as opposed to crossing as well. So it brings you into the house instead of you opening the door and go, oh, don't come in. So, but that's a great plant. There's some monsters over here, really spectacular. It's like, what is that plant? It's like, oh, wow, that's a really cool plant. As you're mixing up to get your different elevations and different solids. This looks a lot like the red tip Petonia, doesn't it? This is a hawthorn. Crazy sun lover, or the smaller ones like a little bit dappled white. This is the late bloom. Usually in the summer you'll get just a big old massive pink. It's really a stunning plant, and it's evergreen. The leaf structure is smaller. It's a little bit more dense, and you can read the labels on these. Some of them have growth rates where they'll get a whole lot bigger. Some of them want to stay 3 foot, some of them want to get 6 foot. But a nice nice hawthorn is really, really pretty plant. And again, it'll completely stop. It'll stop the traffic. When it's in bloom, people will want to know what you got going on. This is a really fun one. Solid. This is last year's leaf. It's an evergreen. It just keeps getting darker green. And it's called a wax leaf privet. Or it could be, sometimes they call it, yeah, wax leaf privet. And this plant has a clump of white flowers, and then it leaves you with a purple berry. Again, you won't have to pick up any berries because the birds laid them. So it's a nice thing to have. The berries are out about now. But the white flower is really fragrant. So it makes it really neat on the way to the front door, part of your hedge. You wanted this to show off, bury it in some of these. 2 of these and 1 of those. Then you have this really dynamic, and you're not waiting for flowers. You just have something that you can't see through, and it'll get as big as you let it. Same thing with either one of these. As a backdrop or something to mix. One of the things that I like to do is I'll mix something that's deciduous with something that's evergreen, both with color. So as a screen, the pyracantha, this is a bush pyracantha, and golden. It'll stay, it wants to get 2 or 3 foot tall, so waist high and 6 foot wide. This will get as big as you let it. And the berries will be red. And they turn red now, which feeds the birds. It has a little clump of white flowers. When you get a big mass of them, you can smell the flowers. It's kind of nondescript. Oh, something's in bloom. It's not like, oh, we'll cut them and bring them in the kitchen sort of thing. But they both have a few thorns. The bush tends to be less thorny. The growth pattern on this is very similar. And it will have berries as well, but it doesn't have any thorns. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. as a baffle. So a screen here, overlapping screen here, and the screen here to create something that is completely blocking the neighbor's view. I've done this multiple times with pyracantha and Joseph's coat or one of the binding roses. And I'll put it on, I'll build a structure. It'll be on hog panels or something next to a hot tub where we've been able to sit out here, deciduous. All we wanted, now we got neighbors. So you build a screen that's evergreen, and then in the summer, he's got his white blooms and the rose is out with all the Joseph's coat comes out yellow and then turns all these different colors, hence the name Joseph's coat, but it'll look like you have a bunch of different colored roses growing on the same vine. It's back against the dark green pyracantha, or this is not more as you can shape them all you want. The pyracantha will get woody enough where it'll support itself. It just looks cool if it's trellised a little bit. Don't use wood. I use metal. The wood and the plastics break down too easily. Backdrop, blend your colors, and then look for fun things like whose name came from. I mean, Rose and Herb are kind of easy, right? Lavender, rosemary. I mean, come on. But there are some out there. Just try to be a little bit more plant intentional. Look at the stalks and the structure, and ask questions about it. Go on a walk around the neighborhood and see what's doing well, because that will be an indicator of the soil that you have. There's bands of soil that go through neighborhoods, but there's also neighborhoods that have different. Before the town was really built and after, we had fires that would come through here. The buffalo and everything ate everything. So it's very difficult to find 200-year-old natural stuff because the tree that was that big and straight, they cut it down to build the town. So it's just not, there's not a lot of soil here. We don't have 1,000 years of forest litter. It just isn't. We have decomposed granite with mixed levels of clay, whether it's soft granite or hard granite, whatever the mineral content is. So get your feeding right. Make sure you're acidifying your soils. Don't plant anything too deep and get it in the ground now. There's one other that I'd like to showcase that I didn't bring up, and it's not really a holly. It's in the barberry family. The barberry is another great family. There's a rocket barberry that'll go 3 or 4 foot tall. It's called an orange rocket, and it's vertical. So it makes a really neat pillar inside of this. They are deciduous, and they are barbed. It's B-A-R-B. So it's got some light thorns on it. The Mahonia family, which is similar to the barberry, has a plant that's often called grape holly. And there's 3 different sizes. There's a medium, there's a creeper, and then there's an upright. The plant is really significant. I know I have them there because I took some out to somebody's house the other day. They'll change colors all year. The leaf is always molting, even though it is evergreen. It'll have yellow and red and this lighter green and dark green as it's putting on new growth. It's a stunning plant. In the spring, it will have this yellow bloom that is very fragrant, really nice to have in the yard. And a purple berry, hence the name grape holly, that the birds will eat. And so it's a really neat evergreen to build into some of this. But you can see this is this is one of my favorite grasses. But grasses you want to have in front of or buried in some of the lower evergreen because it'll die to the ground or die to a pile of brown. This is called the pink muley. It's got a bloom that's similar to the smoke tree. And the reason I like this one is it's very consistent, 3 or 4 foot tall. And it blooms this time of year when it gets real thick. This is just an amazing color to have in the yard. Corners, I like them for corners because they've got a round shape to them and they kind of soften that. But the leaf on this is almost round. You can run your fingers through it, it's not going to cut you. So it's not like a pampas or a pink pampas or an ivory pampas that is, the blades are sharp. This is a really great grass. If you have some backdrop or some rocks or maybe a fence that you want to put something on that will give you color this time of year, your Virginia creeper. You see the berries, the birds will eat that. This is a great plant in between boulders, over boulders, but as a backdrop to an evergreen, pretty stunning. So this can be coming out of that hole, almost the same hole, rolling down the hill, and this is going up. So your dark green summertime, flame red in the winter, and berries for the birds to eat. Very, very cool combo, and different leaf structures. I mean, don't get so carried away that it looks confusing, but you can show off the holly by having dark greens in front of it or with it. Suddenly, that's bright because of what it's up against. So even in your pots, and it's easier to visualize, the cyclamen, which comes in the wintertime. And I just love the cyclamen. In the Middle East, it's actually a wild flower. It's much, much smaller flower, but it's really neat. So in one pot, I have a handful of red and one white. And in the other pot across from it, I'll have a handful of white with a red. Just because I can, but to show off the colors. But what you plant something next to it takes something that might be mundane. If you did a wall of these, the second time you see them, your neighbors see them, or your people come into the house, it's like, oh yeah, I got some. But you mix it in there, and it's like, wow, look at that, standout. So a couple of those and one home. You can still get away with your odd numbers. They don't have to be odd numbers in the same species. You can do 3 of something and they can all be different, or you can do 2 and 1. But your silver, Arizona cypress up against this dark green, stunning. And then they're both evergreen. My neighbor has this. I don't have this. I didn't have a silver enough cypress. Around their mailbox is this, and there's a silver cypress kind of coming out. And when they cut it back, it is just stunning to see that silver up against it. I so badly want to duplicate it, but I have to buy another lot because mine's full. So, any questions, comments, something you want to know about? Oh, you already asked one, so.
I know. I have next questions. I'll just start one. Are any of these, or are there any plants that you would recommend putting into an area that isn't irrigated, that is not easy to go water, that can just handle the in the ambient weather here? Are the oaks that are
So the question is, which is most drought tolerant out of this stuff? I would say these silverberries. They are evergreen, and you will have to take a hose to them. When you first plant them, if you plant them this time of year, you won't have to. It won't be as much as if you plant them in the spring going into summer. But if you can get the roots established, I've seen people get them established, take care of them water-wise for a year, and then wean it back and then just let them go. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And so it might stop growing in size or not as much. You might see a little spurt when you get some rain, but it's not going to thrive. It's not going to get as big as, that these pinions have been there a very long time. And if you want, I'll give you a fun example. One of my buddies, quite a while ago, was in on the science that created the term xeriscape. It's really just a marketing term, but they were doing all kinds of experiments. Who can handle what as far as water and nutrients? the mesquite tree, which is deemed as a zero or less water needy than a magnolia, which would be an extreme, loves to have its toes in the creek, right? The magnolia uses less water than a mesquite. Given the same amount of water, the magnolia will drink until it's satiated, and then it will stop. The mesquite will continue to drink and grow as much as you let it. Then it will cut off the water altogether. Magnolia dies. The mesquite will die to the stuff that come back from the roots if it's that extreme over, of course, a couple of years ago. I mean, none. But a little bit of rain will keep it alive, so it will survive. But that's why you see these enormous mesquites in short periods of time in irrigated places. It's not really even indigenous to the United States, the plantains. But beans have a lot of sugar in them, so they brought them up to the cattle. But you'll see, you'll cut one of those mesquites down, and you'll have a branch this big, and the red hardwood in it, as opposed to the sapwood, is about the size of a pencil or your thumb. And a slower growing, you cut it down, and you'll have a little bit of sapwood, the white, and the whole thing will be red. And that's just how the rate of growth. The hardwood takes longer to develop. It's also the taste you want when you cook. If you want to cook with the red, don't cook with the sapwood. But to answer your question, out of this stuff, the silverberry probably. But first year, you're still going to have to water. Yes, Eric.
Got someone online asking, when do you feed your roses systemic rose food? Do you also feed them plant food or add flower bloom?
Okay, so rose care, when do you feed them the systemic? And do you add other foods to it? So I'm that's why I like the systemic, because it makes the maintenance on roses easier. But I don't like the systemic because it dictates when you can feed what. That's why I don't like to buy mulch or potting soil that already has fertilizer in it. Because if your plant starts to look a little puny, what do you add when it comes in a bag with 12, 12, 12, And are you going to burn it? So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Yes, you would add phosphate to the mix when you want them to bloom. If they're not blooming, you fed them the systemic at least twice a year is what I would recommend. Follow the instructions. It's going to be based on the age of the plant, which is easiest to check by the girth of the plant. Get your dead wood out, feed it systemic in at least twice a year, if not 3 times a year. Augment it with phosphate in the fall and the spring and the summer so that you keep it blooming all year long. But the systemic doesn't mean you don't have to treat it. You're still going to get some fungus, and every once in a while, some bugs are going to come through. So specifically with roses, but also with all your other plants, cut back on the neem oils during the heat of the summer. I use it only in the fall when it's gone dormant, and I will coat the tree or the bush with the neem oil. So I can take that into any of your red buds, your fruit trees, your maples. Get out the dormant oil after they lose their leaves and get the whole thing wet. Coat all the bark with it. Cut everything dead out of whether it's a rose or a maple or a red bud. And then in the spring, when they start to bud, do it again. Spray it again. Walk around it. I like the ones that attach directly to the hose. If you don't do that, then get yourself a pump up. That'll allow you to get a little bit more articulate instead of just blasting the plant. But what you'll have done is you'll have suffocated the spores for the molds and fungus that are setting inside the joints, waiting for it to get warm. And any of the larvae, the scale and some other things are laying on the bark, waiting for it to warm up. But they're breathing through their shell, and basically you suffocate them without having to use toxins. So fall, put your phosphate on the ground, put your oil on the plant. Spring, put your oil on the plant.
So leaves fall off, the oil of the plant, leaves come out, buds, spray it.
The reason dormant oil, one of the reasons dormant oil has the name dormant oil is not only are you spraying it when the plant's dormant, And you can spray it on pines and stuff.
It's
Because
all like cherries and
Yeah.
pears, apples, all that.
in the part of Texas last part of Texas that I was from, we had an inconsistent beginning of winter. And what I would do is, in order to get the right fruiting out of my peach trees and persimmons and some other stuff that I was growing, I would force them into dormancy by spraying all the leaves and everything with the dormant oil, and it would clog their pores and they'd all fall off. So I would force it into dormancy by spraying it with oil. And so, yeah. Yes, sir. Did you have something? Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit about this tree?
Oh, yes. See, this is a blue atlas cedar. And there's several different species of this. This is fun, and this is a common shape. You can, I've seen them trained like dragons down great big stairwells. You know, you can do whatever you want to with it. The serpentine style isn't necessary. But yeah, it's called blue atlas. It's they grow this kind of sparse. It's in the same family as the deodar cedar, and the vertical one looks much like the deodar cedar, and it will have horizontal branching structure. So when they're ancient, they're really great for swings. The deodars that are down around the courthouse are cut up 7 or 8 foot so you can walk underneath them, but the branches come straight out. So that's called blue atlas. This is blue atlas serpentine or twisty. And yeah, it's a great plant. Weeping blue atlas. It's a cedar, yes. Nothing sad about it. It's a pretty plant. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder what you tell me about the Blue Point juniper we had to put in to the house. And there'll be 2 that are very prolific. And then right next to it, another 2 that dried up, died. And it's getting the same water, the same sun.
Well, Blue Point, any of the conifers of size will most likely be ball and bag. And so it's very common to plant them too deep and to not cut the nylon from around the base. I see that. That's the 2 most common problems I've seen. The other thing is you may have a band of clay. Then if you don't, in that, so clay is really dust with the right moisture. And that dust, what holds that together is one of the elements is the calcium and the lack of acid. And a lot of people will use gypsum. But gypsum is effective. It has some the components in it will help. That's why it's used so often. But one of the reasons why it is effective is because when gypsum breaks down, it becomes sulfuric acid. And the acid is what blows apart that molecular structure. And every time a molecule breaks apart, it releases energy. So when you can decompose your clay, you can create a really valuable soil source. And what I do is I just go straight for the acid. When I plant, I don't plant too deep. I'll put acid in the hole, and then I put acid around it. But your humate is really, it's like if you're having trouble with your aspen, it's a great one. They didn't quite get as green, as dark green. Well, they're used to being at the forest floor with all this other stuff and charcoal, actually, because they come roaring back after the forest fires. That's why you'll see bands of the aspen up in the forest. The pines will burn and the aspen will come roaring back. They'll take all the light off the forest floor so that the conifers can't survive. They don't come up because there's too much shade. But so acid is a key. And then you have to see when you're pulling those out how deep they were buried. Because if people bring their habits from other places that are successful, you dig the hole twice as deep. Well, up here, it settles, and you end up with these big wells that fill themselves in, and then all of a sudden you've got a plant that's planted planted too deep.
That's what was confusing, because we had a landscape company come in and put them in, so we were specific about doing it correctly so
Yeah.
that they would survive. And it's very interesting. There's 3 that'll survive and then 2 that won't. We just dug up the stumps.
Yeah.
So we're confused.
Yeah, well, oftentimes, how long did they live?
Probably 3 years.
Yeah, well, then that would be, that is a planting that migrated into a root system.
Yeah.
Error, if they only made it 3 years.
Yep.
And now, common things are too deep, too much mulch in the hole, as opposed to doing mostly native soil with a little bit of mulch. 1/3 mulch, 2/3 native soil. And don't plant it too deep. And deep watering. People will put them on the proper schedule, but when they're first planted, you have to get the water all the way down to the hole. I'm trying to find one of these, it's not going to poke me while I'm doing it, but put this in the ground and you put it on a drip system that goes off 3 times a week, 2 gallons, because you were prescribed 6 gallons a week for this plant. Well, you're supposed to put 6 gallons at one time so that the water gets to the bottom of the hole. There's roots all the way down here. I just witnessed this where we searched for really nice trees. We put 25-gallon trees in the ground, and the crew didn't get the water all the way down to the bottom. And so you have roots that are 2 feet down that are dry. You have to get, when I plant, I'm mixing the soil as I'm laying it back in. I'm not mixing it in the piles, first preference. Layering in a little bit of fertilizer and acid if it's needed. And then I'm soaking it where you have standing water. And then I take the hose, turn it up loud without any attachment on it, and while it's still wet, and I run it down to the bottom of the hole multiple times all the way around, and it'll kind of boil. And that's what it looks like. It's bubbles. And that's the sand filling in the air pockets, which is so very important, because if you have the air pockets with your mulch, then you're setting it up for dry rot or just fungus at roots. So you want that sandy soil to fill in those holes. If you don't have enough sandy soil, I don't buy play sand. I go down to the creek bed and I get some sand. So it's got all the crazy nutrients that come from the fungus and stuff that grows in it while it's wet. And so I have more of a living soil to start with. But and sometimes I can do that when I notice that I go out and see a tree like that and I dig around the side of it. Sometimes I'm looking for grubs, and sometimes I'm just looking for soil quality. If you're having one that's struggling, and if it's too light, it's too perfect of soil, like planting mix, or you can go down and get some sand. Or topsoil will be sand with mulch. And you can crack a couple bags of that around it and water it in. You'll see all the sand just fall into the soil. Then you're filling up your air pockets. Going into winter, that's really important. And you can revive a plant that was planted improperly by bringing in sand. But you got to know that that's the problem. When my first house was up off a copper basin, and there were little spots that had dirt.
Yeah.
Otherwise it was boulders and indigenous decomposed granite. So you almost had to create soil to plant in. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of great purple plants that planted 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Just pathetic growth. Occasional flower, no growth at all.
Well, the crepe myrtle, pathetic growth, very little flowers, right? I have to kind of repeat it so that whoever's paying attention can hear it. So they don't know, just pull something out of the air. Is it in landscaping where there's grass cloth and gravel up around it? So part that a little bit and get down in there and see. You have to dig around the plant to be able to see. If it's real light, then you're going to need some topsoil so you can get some sand in there. This is a root problem because everything is dependent on the roots pulling the nutrients out of the soil and feeding it. And oftentimes when you have, and they're first planted, they're putting the drip right here, and your hole is out to here, and you want your roots out to here. So if it's made it a year, you can at this time take the opportunity to move the drip, see if it's getting enough water. There's a watering schedule in there with the planting, but if on a 5-gallon plant, you want to put 5 gallons at one time, probably in 2 locations, so that you get it down deep enough. It's not, if the plant is alive, it'll go dormant here in short order, but it should bloom all summer. And it should put on a foot of growth. There's dwarfs, but a crepe myrtle fed and watered properly with the right sun, that's a standard size. It's not uncommon for that plant to be 12 foot tall.
If you were to dig it out, it may still be a root.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is still the shape of the pot that it was planted in, because it didn't spread out. But I'd start by finding out if you need some sand in the hole, and I would part the cloth a little bit. You can always cut the cloth out and then roll the gravel back in. And if it's not a high traffic area, that's the gravel. The cloth actually keeps the gravel from becoming one with the soil. And so you might have to add some gravel later, but I would make sure that's not planted too deep. Well, you should be able to see roots when you part it, you should almost see roots. You could be able to tell where the stem starts. There's the meristematic material is the green stuff right below the bark, and that's the growth. So the meristematic material changes molecular structure when it turns to roots. It goes from roots to stem, and the roots can handle a little bit of air and sunlight more than the stem can handle the stuff that's alive in the soil. You'll girdle it. If you see a tree that's planted too deep, and a bad storm comes by, that's the tree that just snaps off, because it's the bugs, if you will, the germs in the soil that are good for the soil are girdling the plant. The plant could look good, and then it just snap off. The tree that's planted and doesn't get enough deep water and could survive and make it into and just decide that it's going to live with water for a lawn, for example, and never gets too deep and it waters every other day, that's the tree that blows over and you can see all the roots, because it's just going shallow, or it's laying on a pan. But that's those you can just kind of prop back up and get a cool angle out of them. You cut a bunch of roots off and pile dirt around it. Usually get it to grow just really neat. But so those are, and a lot of times these conifers, you'll see them, they look a little puny. They're already dead. And it's very difficult to bring them back. And they look like they die overnight. Well, then no, it takes 6 months or so to kill it. But once the bigger ones start to go, it's that these monsters here, you see the forest problems. Their first defense is the sap. So the bugs bore into them, the tree suffocates the critter with the sap. If it's not watered, that's why you can protect yours. If you have property and you have some indigenous junipers, pines, and stuff on it, every once in a while, just go out and soak them. And it'll bring back the health of the plant. Once the bugs start and they don't have the sap, the plant loses. That's how the boring insects, not the insects that can't tell a joke or communicate well, but those that bore into your trees, those they win, and they'll start to see it. It's like, yeah, it's too late. So keep them healthy. But a good solid drink twice a summer, and when you're not getting the rain on an indigenous tree, it'll make all the difference in the world. Your neighbor's plant dying versus yours.
Talking about great myrtles, we just moved here about 5 weeks ago. We moved here from Texas. We're up in an area where great myrtles don't know very well, and you have to fight place for everything. But what I need from great myrtles is 3 times a year, dig a trench around it, rose food mixed with Plus.
Wait, it's with what?
It's rose food and you mix it with Plus. It's chelated iron.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that stuff, bring it up with flour. Can't make it grow. I have out on the south side of the house. Because I've been noticing each year, we're trying to get an idea for both gardeners. And we're trying to get an idea of what grows here.
Yep. What part of Texas were you from? Amarillo.
So we fought play school. And, I dug down about 10, 12 inches.
Yeah? Well, and what it'll do is once you break through that pan, because there are places out there that have just a caliche pan, it's already got enough sunlight or enough air to it where it's hard. It'll be, and then you'll go back to the decomposed sandy. But I've had augers just bounce on that stuff. And then you use pry bar and some.
But you never know how to leave.
No, you don't. with that, if you don't want to fight that, then what we have found works really well is use some of the stone, buy some stone, but make huge wells. And then the tree will find a spot for it to break through and go down, but you plant it just enough. Where I'm digging a hole half the size, but I'm covering it up with soil in the hole. Cherry trees love that because they want to be deep water, but elevate. Yeah. But I'll go big as opposed to just as much as I need. It'll be in a bed that I've created that allows me to have the right amount of sand in the soil and a good drainage. But then ideally up here is deep water, less frequent. That's what works.
Yeah, I was talking to the landscaper because we're having a couple of 25-gallon trees up there. Just we're wanting to get it on real quick. And he'd never heard of me. That's all we do.
Yeah. No. Yeah,
It's all that you can feed as much as you want on the surface, but unless you go down deep, he'd never heard of it.
Yeah. Oh no, there's he's bringing up different styles of fertilizing, and the deep root feeding is a common thing with if you have the liquid and you want to go down in there. What I like to do, because I like the slow release of the fertilizer, I'm either removing the poles, and as opposed to snapping them off when you've had poles planted, then I'm rocking it around, taking the time to pull it out, I'm adding my granular fertilizer to that. So I've got it slow, it's releasing slower into the soil, and then I'm covering it up, but I will create that, like the maples that I bought that were in my yard. I separated it, I pulled the grass cloth back, and I made just a brick bed, and I put some low growing, I like herbs, so the oreganos and the thyme, the creeping thyme and the low oregano are edible, and they're almost evergreen here. They're perennial. They'll get covered in snow, but they'll come roaring back, and you can eat them. So in doing that, now I have an area that's 4 foot, as opposed to just a ring around the tree. And in the corners, I took rebar and I pounded it in and opened up a hole, and I put my acid and iron, and acid combo in those holes. And this year I had just vibrant green, and right now they're just glorious red as they're turning into the fall. Same plant that I thought I was going to have to remove 3 times. Twice. No, I do it a little bit where, but once I do it in the fall and in the spring. Yeah, but I'll tap down. The only problem is you got to know where your water lines are, because Murphy's Law is you're going to split one of your water lines. So know where those are, and get them after the first year. Get them a little bit farther away from the planting bulb. Bring them onto the outside of that hole, but less frequently, deeper water, and don't just lay it on top. If you're going to use the granular, this food is developed for the area. And I don't know, it's not, the family didn't come from industrial gardening school. You know, Mr. Waters is a person. Ken Lane married Lisa Waters. The family is active all the time. That product is developed for the area that we can't call. Once you start adding minerals, then they don't allow you to call it organic. But that's as organic as it gets. Fat guano, chicken scat, cottonseed casings to create a higher acid, and that's why it's so light, 744, and you feed quarterly, and you can do it on top if you planted it properly, I do this frequently for people whose yards just look puny. I'll change the watering on the lawn, and I'll go in and I'll do a combination of those two, because you're not gonna, with the humic acid, you won't burn. I'll put down acid and I'll put down the 744, and I'll take a big cone on my sprinkler head, and I'll go and I'll do the whole front yard, and I'll take my spout and I'll go and melt it. I'll get it started, even though the sprinkler's on and it might rain or it might not rain. The sprinkler, your drip systems are so localized that if you don't start breaking it down, this little head over here isn't going to bring more. It's going to bring the nutrients down. So you throw the granular on top, but you've got to break it down. So I'll hose it in real good, and I'll just get it. I call it melting, but I start melting the fertilizer. I get it off the rocks and into the soil, and but that's every other year. The acid's every other year, and the fertilizer is quarterly. So you're not putting. Being from Texas, I say it's important to have some oil and gas in your retirement portfolio, but I don't want it in my tomatoes. And most of the fertilizers that are consistent high numbers, like 10, 10, 10, 16, 16, 16, those are petroleum byproducts. And you'll still get results, and it's great for growing rows of oranges in the sand, because you just want production. But for yards, you want something a little bit more balanced. And this stuff all seeps into our aquifer, so just be smart about it. But yeah, here it is different. And I don't have a whole lot of experience in Amarillo, except for when I moved out here and I didn't understand the soil. I was in a different industry, but I've been growing my whole life. So I went to ASU and got my Master Gardener certification just for the soil science. But the encyclopedia that is for the soil is Texas to California. This southwest part is, aside from some veins, is all got a very similar composition. So it's how you treat it and what's below it. You have you're fortunate actually to have that pan shallow, because a lot of times what happens is it's low and you plant stuff and you end up with stuff in bowls, and they over time will get rot because you're adding water and it's not going in. And you break through it and you're back down into something that percolates better. There's an orchard that was planted with the settlers that's on the way to Sedona, and all the fruit trees are non-grafted, so they're all original fruit harvest straight from the root to the tree, and it's sitting in this big granite bowl, and there's no irrigation, and there's probably several hundred, like 500 and 600 fruit trees. The people who bought it 10 years ago or so are replacing those that are aging out, and so it's really interesting. But that bowl, the roots don't percolate, and the roots are able to go down into it and get enough water with the basic rainfall and the seepage from the aquifers. And it's just it's a neat little phenomenon. So it's it is how you feed them. But they to answer your question about Craig, he's exactly right. You got to know how it's planted. So part it, you can probably see by when you part it what it was grown in. Dig outside of that, find out what you're dealing with. If it's a grub problem, you'll know in 4 inches. Yes, ma'am.
When do you prune back roses?
When do you prune back roses? I do mine. So I have a Joseph's coat that we'll put on 3-foot branches covered in flowers and it'll weigh itself and snap off. And then I've got others that are just more rigorous. But the consistent cutting is in the winter, I'll go in and take out the dead wood and coat it with oil. And then in the spring, I'll cut for size. And I do that because we'll have this odd week or two of nice, warm, perfect weather. And if you're cutting the green wood and it gets warm, it'll start to grow. And I don't want to do that if it's going to freeze. Mother's Day is real. So I'm feeding them before Mother's Day. Might trim them, but even most of the stuff that is perennial, that is deciduous, I will shape the sticks when it gets cold, just so it doesn't look so out of control. And then in the spring, as it starts to come out, I let the plant tell me, unless I want a particular shape like the rose.
So I can still fertilize?
You most certainly can. I would put phosphate on them because you should get flowers up until it gets cold. It should be in its second or third blooming season right now.
How about lavender? When should you prune it? Because the lavender doesn't look good after a while.
So when to prune lavender? And it will, have you had this lavender multiple years? Okay. So just shape it now, but because it's old, what will happen with lavender and your potentilla, the yellow one that's in the yard, they'll get to a point where the plant isn't as healthy unless you get real aggressive with it. So wait till after Mother's Day and take some of the dead wood out. And what I like to do on a plant like a lavender, the potentilla, you just have to cut down like to 8 or 10 inches off the ground. But the lavender, because it's not that big, I take out part of it at a time. So if it has like 6 main pieces that go out and then become the plant, I'll take 3. And then I'll let that heal, and then I'll take the other 3. It could be in the same year. It's just that I don't like to just whack it completely down and aggressively feed it when you do that. So I think we're done.
Yes, thank you.
Happy planting. And there are a couple of things that you can do. If you know that you're going to do some planting, what I like to do is get a plan. This will make it easier for you. So, because I'm an impulse buyer. I'm also, I heard a term the other night that really struck me. Emotionally incontinent. How's that? I'll cry at sunsets, or my grandkids will say something nice to me. I just, I'm out of control. So, but I like to have a plan because I do spontaneous buying. I do, I see something that's cool and I want to buy it. If I have a plan, then my yard doesn't look like that. Even if I plant something here now, working on this bed, and I go in and buy something that fits over here, I know where to put it. So get a plan so that even when you're piddling, you're working towards the plan. And then every once in a while, like right now, and you want to do a lot of planting, you can come in and buy everything in that plan. And what I like to do is I actually do storyboards where I'll take everything I want to buy and I'll lay it out here on the sidewalk, and I'll have it stepped down size-wise and color coordinated, and I'll buy it all and I'll put it back there and I'll let them love it until I want to do it. I'll dig 4 or 5 holes, then I'll come and get the plants. So I don't have to have them sitting in pots in the perfect, or if I take them home, I put them where I'm going to plant them so that they can get acclimated to the sun. But you can buy opportunistically when things are on sale, like the roses. You don't take them all home. You don't want to leave them over winter here, but take them when you can, and have a plan. And that will allow you to do that. If you have trouble getting that plan, or if there's a little area that you're not quite sure about, or you're from another area and you don't know the soil as well as you'd like to, come and get a consultation here when the plants are in. You spend $250 on a gift card for yourself. All of that goes to plants. That's not hard to spend. You can go to fertilizer and dirt or whatever. But then that allows you to schedule an hour and a half with somebody that works here to help you pick them out uninterrupted, so they're not taking care of somebody else and answering questions. So that the 250 goes to the plants. It doesn't go to that person. Waters takes care of that person. So that's a way of getting the encouragement that you need to go ahead and make the spend. And on the crepes, wait till summertime, we're bringing them in again because that's when we're in bloom. And get some companions. It's not going to help them grow any better, but crepes are some of my favorite. And they'll get so big every once in a while you got to cut them in half so that the flowers are at your level.
I was always told never to feed those in the fall.
Well, I fed them phosphate in the fall with my peaches so that I would have, the roots would be big. But I'd have these monster bases that red and whites are the strongest I've found. The pinks are nice, but I like the good Apache red, and then there's one that's white. And every so many years I would just have to cut them down so the flowers were where I could see them. When they get big, the bark peels, and it's just spectacular. It's just real smooth, beautiful bark.
Would you feed phosphate to, besides the peaches, apples and cherries?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I give it to everything. I buy it back with the intent of emptying it. So I literally put it on everything. My grasses, everything. And I do it in the winter or in the fall when everything starts to get.
So right now is too warm still.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to bring it home just because if it starts to rain, I want to put it down.
Mid-November.
Yeah, I don't like to give dates because it's just like on I'll give you a perfect example. When I'm watering and I know I want to put 5 gallons on something, the first time I do it, I take my hose and I count. What's it take to fill up a 5-gallon bucket?
Exactly.
So I don't have to fill up a 5-gallon bucket every time I want to put 5 gallons on it. I know if I turn the hose up and I count to, I'm going to say it, I count to 50, and I get a 5-gallon bucket. Well, I'm using, and I tell people very specifically, I don't like to use numbers because you get that in your head. Kevin said, count to 50 is 5 gallons. My wife is telling that to somebody on the phone the other day. It's an example. You got to do it at your house. Get your own 5-gallon bucket.
I do mine.
What's your water pressure?
Yeah, water pressure size of your hose. I have got those Mondo, red.
Yeah. You got a
Hoses.
5/8 hose or you got a 1-inch hose?
I got a 1 inch.
We have these huge water tanks.
Yeah.
We collect water. So it doesn't, we put a pump on it, which makes it come out faster.
No, fill your own bucket up and do your own counting. I'm not going to tell you because they get it stuck in their head and it's just like. But she took horticulture in high school, so she knows. She'll go up to my sprouts and she'll pull on them to see if they go. Don't. No, don't do that. All right.
Thank you.
Look for people's names and things that are named after plants. And get curious. Look at the stems and find out what's going on. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, we already clapped.
Yeah, they're out of class. You weren't here. I missed it.
I gotta find this picture.
Okay.
I don't know what this thing is that's growing. I mean, it's a big.
So what brought you here from Amarillo?